Hey guys, Tyler again. Today I'm going to show you how to make throwing knives and a target out of some scrap wood and a circular saw blade. Here we go. So in order to create the frame of our throwing target, we will need a total of 7 different boards, potentially get away with 6 of them. So we have 2 1x4s that are 15 3/4 inches. Those are going to be our side boxes. We have 2 boards that are 10 5/8, those are top and bottom, and then 3 additional 10 5/8 inch long boards. That's going to be our back pieces. How it can be built, it can just be with 1 1x4, but I have a bunch of scrap, so I have some boards that were cut down that'll be just fine as well. So in order, that's the frame of the target, but in order for the actual target itself, you'll need 28 2x4 blocks that are cut to 2 3/4 inches. That's this distance here. And then what'll happen is you can just stack these in the target, and then you'll be throwing into end grade. So here's our target box. As you can see, it's just very simple butt joints together. One key factor, if you're using this setup with the 28 2x4s, you want the 10 5/8 piece to go inside of your sides. This way you can get 7 across. So also from the back, I put 3 in there. That is for each one to have some kind of support as you line them up here. And you can see how 4 will fit in there. And then at each joint, there is some kind of board there. You could probably get away with 2 and not do this middle one, but just an option there. In order to hang it to the wall, all you need to do is find a single stud, and then you can put a screw here and here directly into the stud. And since it's not really load bearing, that will be no problem at all. Which is 2 screws. As you can see, the 2x4 slide in there nice and tight. Sometimes, especially if you're not cutting it with a stop block, those 10 5/8 pieces can get a little different in length, creating some tight spots. So if you are going to make this 10 5/8, you might want to bump that up to say 10 3/4, just to give yourself a little bit extra wiggle room. If you're going to use a 7 1/4 inch saw blade, you can get 2 throwing knives per blade. As you can see here, I have 2 set up on there. They're a little bit different sizes as I was going through testing these. But one of the critical things to know is some saw blades have this cutout here. And if you don't account for that, you'll get these funny edges on your throwing knives. It won't really affect how they're thrown, but it can affect their looks. So what I found best to do is to get an approximate size. I know that I can get a 6 1/4 inch blade out of this specific saw blade with the best case of 1 1/4 inch. So best way to do this, draw yourself a box of that size, and then for symmetry purposes, put a tick mark on the halfway point on top and bottom, and draw a profile that you like on only one side. What we'll do next is cut that out, fold it in half, cut our box out, fold it in half, and then cut the other profile out, and you'll have a perfectly symmetrical blade. Once you do that, I like to just put it on some wood, and then we'll cut it out, refine it, and then actually use that as a template to get our additional throwing knives as close to the same as possible. Okay, so we cut out our paper template. You can see the crease there. So it should be pretty symmetrical. We'll just have to double check there. I've already transferred that onto my wood, and then just rough cut it out. Now I'm going to use the sander to refine that shape and make sure it's what I like. So we have our wood template down to our final shape. It is not perfect, just using my belt sander here. So one mistake you can see is the curve is not the same on both sides. I like this curve better. So what we'll do is just before we We'll only use the template on one side, on our steel, and then use the first knife we make as a template for the second. Now that we have our design onto our saw blade, we need to cut it out. So you can use an angle grinder, which is what I'll be using because I have it. I mean, you can also use just your regular old hacksaw, and that's going to be no problem as well. If you're really ambitious, you can just use a file and do the entire thing out. I actually bought this one yesterday for $4 at an antique mall. So this entire project is super cheap to do if you're starting out from nothing. So here I'm using the angle grinder to rough out the profiles. All I'm doing is taking very light passes to establish my cut line, and then when it gets close to that point, I can break it with 2 sets of pliers. Here near the end it's starting to get a little hot, so I'm going to use a pair of pliers to hold that down. Here I'm using my belt sander to establish the curve profile on the throwing knives. This is a 36 grit belt to rough it in. I use the belt grinder to establish the curve area here. They are not perfect to my template, but they are easiest to make with the curved radii of the belt sander. Here I'm using my 1x40 belt sander to finish the profile of the blades. I am just going back and forth, consistently ducking it in water to keep it cool, just so it doesn't get too hot to the touch. Now that we have our blanks roughed out, we are going to clean up any of the edges, make sure they're not super sharp, and then put a bevel on our blade. These don't have to be perfect. I am going to put it all the way down because I like how that looks, but really only sharpen probably the first inch or so. So we'll do that with the belt grinder. You can also do this with a file if you have it. Here I'm removing any burrs that are on the knives and sharpening them just with strokes that are even on each side, flipping it back and forth to try and establish a consistent bevel. So here it's fairly sharp, but it could still definitely be sharpened up, which I will do off camera and just showing I cleaned up all the burrs. And notice I had it on this one, so just finishing that off now. This will make it nice to the touch and won't cut you when you throw it. So that concludes this project. Overall, this took me about 2 hours to make, approximately 30 minutes for the target, and then about 45 minutes each per blade. But I have gotten quicker since I've started, being that these are the 6, I've made a total of 6. This is a gift, that's why I'm not throwing it at the new target. And if you do decide to make this, I'd love to see any photos or videos of you guys making it or using it. Thanks, have a great day, and God bless.